Welcome to the Heal Podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Goris, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. And I've discovered on my journey that so much more is possible than we can begin to imagine. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Heal Podcast. I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Kate Rice. Kate Rice is an author and prize-winning reporter who is also a runner, a hiker, a rock and roll singer, and stand-up comic who performs mostly in the shower, but sometimes on stage, which is so awesome. Nearly 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with anaplastic thyroid cancer, a rare cancer so aggressive it only comes in stage 4. Average survival rate, 6 months. She got the diagnosis 3 weeks after completing the Imogene Pass Run, a 17-mile race over a 13,000-foot mountain pass. Her new memoir, Cured: Beating Stage 4 Cancer and the Culture That Caused It, is about her road to recovery, not just from the cancer diagnosis, but from societal norms that made her vulnerable to that diagnosis. Rice is a firm believer in using holistic practices, including our dear friend Joe Dispenza's meditations, acupuncture, Reiki, a positive mindset, and a healthy sense of humor to help our amazing bodies do what our bodies love to do, heal. Her medical team at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, encouraged her to pursue these complementary therapies in tandem with MD Anderson's treatments, which included surgery, chemo, radiation, and immunotherapy. She now lives in Park City, Utah, where she is a ski instructor and rock and roll radio DJ. I mean, I want your life, Kate.
Well, I'm glad to have it.
That's amazing. So I guess I love your story. I mean, you are just, the poster child of hope and determination and faith and grit. And I'd love for you just to kind of share with the audience, how you came to find out about your diagnosis and kind of the story leading up and the story to where we are today, really. And then we'll get into some questions.
Okay, cool. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on your podcast because I've been a big fan. And while I was training for the Imogene Pass Run, your podcast was one that I was listening to when I was doing like a lot of trail running and stuff. So
that's amazing.
It's definitely been part of my own healing process. So in the fall of 2021, I was a newly divorced empty nester poised to finally start the life that I had been promising myself I would pursue for years. I had been a kid who grew up in the Midwest, and I had grown up, gone to college, worked for some local newspapers, then headed west to be a ski bum, and then went east to go to grad school in New York City, which is a pretty fun town to be in when you're in your 20s and 30s. And one thing looking back that I realized was my body had been sending me some pretty clear messages that I wasn't listening to it and it wasn't happy about it. And I think that's a lot of what you cover in both your documentary and your podcast. And stuff like I had eczema when I was a little kid the entire time from childhood until I left for college. And looking back, I realized I was a tomboy, active kid being raised by a mother who wanted me to be a lady. And I wanted to be Joan Jett. And so we battled a lot. And it was a very traditional type mother-daughter relationship and a father who said, do what your mother wants. And as soon as I leave home, eczema goes away. And she and I actually start having a fairly good relationship. I mean, a pretty good relationship. We definitely have our battles and stuff. And then off to New York. And one thing that happened when I was having fun in New York was I all of a sudden got a big lump in my neck. And I went to a doctor and he's like, oh, it's fat. And I'm like, I have fat on my stomach and it's squishy. This isn't squishy. And I go to another doctor and she's like, no, this is something you have to have surgery. They do surgery. They take it out. It's actually fairly dense, which is sometimes a bad indicator for stuff. But it was totally benign. And the doctor says, just be sure to keep an eye on this in the future because sometimes they come back and things go, it can be very, very dangerous. And I'm like, fine. And the thing, looking back, I was living in New York, had a great job, globetrotting reporter, big friend group, a boyfriend who made me feel cherished. I ran every day, ate my vegetables. I partied pretty hard and stuff like that. So I was not perfect, but all systems were working the way you want them to. My body liked the way I was treating it, and my immune system was working, dealing with all those rogue cells that pop up every day. And I was fine. Then fast forward 20 years, two beautiful kids, but children bring stress to relationships, which we all know. I know. And I mean, they are the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, but I definitely am no longer feeling cherished. And my doctor finds some like little nodules on my thyroid and says, we need to get these looked at. So for the next 5 years, I get them biopsied every year. And they're what's called indeterminate, not malignant, but not benign either. So then the marriage crashes and burns. And, I'm starting a new life. I start trying to sing. I start singing rock and roll. My favorite song was I Hate Myself for Loving You by Joan Jett. certain patterns do repeat themselves. Yeah. And then I'm getting ready to leave the city, to leave New York, where I've spent most of my adult life, but kind of dragging my feet. And because I want my kids to be able to come home to their hometown and their mother's still there. But I'm getting ready to leave New York and move west back to the mountains. And I'm training for this run. And I noticed during the summer that I'm having trouble with my long runs, and where I can't quite do them. I'd have to keep having to take a break. And I also noticed these nodules. All of a sudden I have big lumps in my neck. Call up my endocrinologist. She can't see me. So I spend the rest of the summer training for imaging and trying to get in to see doctors. And finally, I get a surgeon who will take out these lumps and biopsy them, like right after I run imaging. So I do imaging, have the surgery, 10 days later, go back for my follow-up with the surgeon. And she looks at me and she says, you have cancer. I'm like, I've had cancer before. I'd had, melanoma, which is not nothing, but I'd had a Mohs procedure, been clean for 16 years. And she looks at me and I'm like, this is very different. And she just hands me a piece of paper. And on it, I read anaplastic thyroid cancer, stage 4, 6 months.
Jesus.
And then I keep reading, and there's one sentence that's in there twice. There are some long-term survivors. And I had to tell my kids, and I said, there are some long-term survivors, and I'm going to be one. Mm-hmm. And so I made that promise to them. And I think that helped. I think it made a big difference.
And here you are today.
Here I am. I'm a long-term survivor. I could almost cry just saying that. So
it's massive triumph,
Yeah.
So when was that diagnosis?
That was October of 2021. So it'll be 3 years this coming October.
Okay. That's amazing. From 6 months to 3 years and well beyond.
Yeah. I'm going to, Rita Moreno she's my goddess. I'm going to be a 92-year-old like her, just up there kicking butt. That's my goal.
I have no doubt. So tell me how you seem like you're well-rounded, like had fun, but you're healthy, you're a runner. I was a runner before, so I understand, I feel like we have similar mindsets. Walk me through, because there's so much fear that comes with that paper, right? And those words and 6 months and the rare aggressive, those qualifiers are awful. How did you, tell me what your thought process is in those first few weeks and how you navigated what they were, throwing at you?
Well, the very first night, I wake up in the middle of the night and wow, that was really a bad dream. And then I'm like, it wasn't a dream. And I'm like, universe, what the hell? I've been using my voice. I mean, literally, I've been doing all the right stuff. What is going on? And basically it was like, well, you say you're going out west, but you're not. You're still in New York. You're just, and all of a sudden I thought, okay, this is a kick in the butt for me to do what I've been long wanting to do. And so I recognized that. And also, I was just determined to live. First of all, I was like, I don't feel like I'm someone with stage 4 cancer. I just ran a 17-mile run over a 13,000 foot mountain peak. I mean, given I was like walking after once I hit like 8,000 feet. But I mean, you have to make certain cutoff points or they make you go back down the mountain. Wow. Because they can't have people on the mountain all day long because the weather is very mercurial.
Yeah.
And also, I had 0 symptoms. It is a disease that comes with some, like 95% of people, the reason they even know they have it is they lose their voices. Tumors grow so quickly, people have to have tracheotomies so that they can breathe. Oof. And 2 days in, by chance, one of my cousins connected me with a doctor who, unlike the New York doctors who diagnosed me, who had never seen this cancer, said he was very familiar with it, had trained surgeons at MD Anderson. And he's like, this doesn't sound right. I highly doubt this diagnosis. You've got to get somewhere where you can get a second opinion and find out what's happening. And so I was like, oh, they were wrong. And so that helped a little bit. And I'm just like, it just planted a seed of doubt. And then, but the other thing I did was, and long story short, they did ultimately confirm the diagnosis, but this disease did not act to me the way it acted with anybody else. And I truly thought it was because I am extraordinarily healthy. I led a very healthy lifestyle and I was doing a lot of stuff right. And I also think I'm just incredibly resilient. So, but what I did was I started looking for miracles right away. And I found them within my inner circle, like the friend's father who had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer like 25 years ago, when it was really, the problem with pancreatic cancer is apparently it doesn't show up until it's so far advanced, you can't do anything. Mm-hmm. He died like in his 90s of, his heart gave out. Yeah. The friend whose husband, they did some kind of scan and he lit up like a Christmas tree and cured by a treatment that hadn't been available 5 years earlier. And then I started casting my net wider and wider and finding more. And basically, I would get stuff like, for instance, my chemo doctor said, you will not lose your hair because you're getting low dose once a week. The chemo is not to hit the cancer. It's to help the radiation. And I told everybody that. He said, I'm going to keep my hair. But people were still saying, aren't you going to shave your hair? I'd be like, no. I mean, so you're right. There is this cancer trauma that we have to fight. And there's something called Cancer Horizons that looks at living and thriving with cancer. And they did something where movies still, you want to have a tragedy, just throw in a cancer diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Brian's song was, 40 years ago. That plot stuff line still comes up today. And so my big thing is there is no such thing as false hope. There is only hope. It gives you the courage to survive and to try and to, there's no such thing as false hope. There's only hope, and hope gives you the courage to fight. And the other thing was I stood up for myself. I left New York and the doctors who had basically ignored me. And one of my cousins, and I sent out a group text as soon as I got the diagnosis to my siblings, to one of my cousins. And my cousin, by the time I left the doctor's office, had found that MD Anderson had a clinic that specialized in treating anaplastic thyroid cancer. And on my way home, as I walked home up Columbus Avenue, I'm on the phone with MD Anderson, setting up my appointment there, which I could do because I just turned 65 and I was on Medicare and I could just go straight to MD Anderson. Miracle. If it had happened a year earlier, I don't know what had happened. So, I immediately told people, I asked for help. I looked for miracles and I was determined to live. Yeah. And then I get to MD Anderson, which is a wonderful place. And all of a sudden I had a team that was working with me and they were very honest. They did not pull any punches. Like I had surgery and the surgeon, biggest cowboy boots. He was wearing these beautiful cowboy boots, not in the operating room, but when I met him. But the day after the surgery, we have a meeting and he says, the odds aren't good.
Mm.
But we do cure some people with this cancer. I'm like, that's the sentence, part of the sentence that I'm listening to. So I just did that. And the team at MD Anderson, the endocrinology department, surgery, radiation, where it's a place that just bustles with can-do-ness. I mean, I had a 2-hour Zoom session with a radiation nurse who'd been doing this for like 25 years about all the different side effects. It was like me and a whole bunch of other people getting, radiation on our throats. And, I won't tell you everything, but, you're getting sunburned on the inside and outside of your throat. And you have to be able to keep eating. You've got to keep gaining weight. You can't lose weight at the end, he did a 2-hour Zoom session with me and all these other people. And at the very end, he goes, "We cure people here." What other cancer center uses the word cure?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else talks about remission. I never hear anyone say remission. I hear cure, disease-free, that sort of thing. So that was huge to just have a team that was with me and listened to me. And then I got tons of support from family, from friends. I started a blog that was like a password protected blog. So I kept people updated on what was happening with me. I mean, funny stuff happened. Like one of my brothers comes and, this is the other thing I was really fortunate with. My cousin who lives in Houston, I was able to just stay with her.
Mm.
I mean, God bless her husband, he's not my cousin. And so like my whole family comes one by one to visit, all sorts of different adventures. And what I did was I sort of trained my support team to be positive. I mean, I did redo my will, but I'd been meaning to do that anyway. You never know.
Yeah.
But just that kind of thing.
It's so, I mean, just that, and you were listening to the Heal podcast, so you're somewhat prepared. No, but it is so important to, because you mentioned in the article that I read, you're a reporter, so you immediately cast out a net to like gather information and learn as much as you could about this cancer, and then gather information about miracles to strengthen your belief in possibility with your cancer and with other rare cancers that people overcame, or rare diseases in general. And I just think also like it's so important to be surrounded by people with the same mentality, that like, and to really, you have to be, very protected and have boundaries up again around you in this process. And what a blessing. How cool is that MD Anderson gives people hope. I mean, there's so much litigation and, the health insurance and hospitals, and these poor doctors are so afraid of getting sued that they can't even give, or they're burnt out and just like devastated because they have seen so much loss. Like they just don't feel right giving hope. But it's like, but if we just focus on the fact that there was those sentences on the paper that said there have been, what did the sentence say again?
It said twice, there are some long-term survivors.
That's
and
like,
it was in there twice.
Just that should be included in every diagnosis. Give people a granule of hope, and then let them, because with hope that opens the door and gives them the motivation to investigate and find out what those survivors did.
Exactly. Yeah. And like you talk to people about that all the time. Like Bruce Lipton talks about the power of, like, he has some words that he uses that I can't remember, but it's all about being positive, letting positive thoughts fill your brain and not the negative ones.
Placebo versus nocebo.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then like, I think it's David Hamilton. I listened to his book I was doing some long cross-country drive, and he's talking about placebos and about working for the pharmaceutical industry. And I forget exactly what the numbers were, but give people the actual medicine and 75% recovery rate or effectiveness, give people the placebo 40, 50, 60. I'm like, oh, yeah, really? And so there is an increasing emphasis on the whole mind-body connection. And that's what I really look for. I just heard some podcast where a guy was talking about how each of our cells has its own little brain, and all those little brains talk to each other. Yeah. And I'm just like, I want all my cells to be in sync, which is a lot of what Joe Dispenza talks about, just synchronicity or coherence, is mind-body coherence. But the thing is, that's getting increasingly more common. Like the University of Wisconsin, Madison, I grew up in Wisconsin, has this whole center that talks about using meditation for all sorts of healing, like kids who grew up in traumatic homes, how to use meditation for them to learn to cope and survive and thrive. And so I think there is a growing base of knowledge, growing acceptance of it, which, as evidenced by all my doctors at MD Anderson, who were very supportive of all my efforts to do complementary type treatments and practices. And I'm very big on that. And the other reason why I think it's important is it empowers you, the patient. You're not just someone who you're letting these other people taking care of you. I mean, they are the pros. They know the disease you've been diagnosed with, but you know your body and what you can do to make everything work together as a team. So like when I was getting radiation treatment, I was strapped down on the machine, and I would envision these gates to my body opening up and the little radiation rays running in, and then my cells running up and grabbing their hands, and they're all laughing and they're like, let's go off and find some cancer to zap. And I came out of radiation disease free.
I mean, that's amazing. I love that. I think it was David Hamilton that talked about the visualization and how powerful that is.
He does a visualization that I do every night.
The quantum healing one, I think it is. Yeah. And as you were talking about the placebo and the nocebo, a lot of people think like placebo is this, oh, it's all in your head and it's your belief and like, things get better. But it makes me think of Dr. Joe Dispenza was the one who taught me this, but he mentioned this Yale researcher named Harold Saxton Burr. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But he did research, it was always thought that matter emitted an energy field, like especially human cells and atoms and all these things. The rock, just all matter emits an energy field, an electromagnetic field around it. But what this Yale researcher discovered was that it's not the matter that emits the field, it's the field that organizes the matter. So I love when you just switch perspective. And so the energy field, which is very much, I think, created and generated by your beliefs and your thoughts and what you're putting your intention on, then has a frequency and it affects your electromagnetic field. And then that is the field that allows that tumor to organize, right? The cancer cells to thrive. So it's not the only aspect of the equation, but why the placebo works, why someone taking a sugar pill can actually feel chemically a difference and heal their depression, because their subconscious believes that sugar pill is going to have an effect, and then the brain actually releases the exact same chemistry they think they're getting from the pill, but the pill was an inert substance and the brain released the chemistry, and voila, they feel better. So it's that belief system can really affect our biochemistry, our physiology. And it's just that alone, which is why like Anita Moorjani had a shift in consciousness in her near-death experience, and her body completely reorganized in a matter of weeks, and all the cancer was gone from her body. So I'm fascinated by that. And you are clearly, with your visualization and your positive intention and focus, it created a field and an environment where you healed.
And you were the one who introduced me to Anita Moorjani. I bought her book after listening to you interview her about her more recent book. And I just think I have a friend who had breast cancer, disease-free, then it came back many years later, and she's actually doing fine. And she also had just discovered that book, her Dying to Be Me. And I'm like, I just read the near-death experience chapter like every couple months, just to like plant that in my brain again, Yeah. And so.
And what I love about that as well is, I think the greatest fear that we all have is fear of death, right? Because we're so in this separate, illusion of separation. And her story, it correlates to many other near-death experiences, so that strengthens our belief. But ultimately, I think what happened with her is she stopped fearing death because she experienced getting, having her consciousness leave her physical body, felt that liberation, felt that reconnection with source, which is, magnanimous love that we can't even describe in human words or frequency. And then she had this all-knowingness and interaction with her father's essence, and all of the turmoil and conflict and judgment was gone on both sides. And so just to feel that expansion in love, it's like, why would we want to come back into our body? But that when she did come back in her body, she no longer feared death because she knew what happens after we leave our bodies. And I think just having that, I mean, like, can I have that experience without going through something traumatic? Because if we can live life without that fear, we can we can have more joy and find more humor in life, and in the traumas and the tragedies and these terrifying circumstances that you went through.
And I did love that chapter for that, and how she finally ultimately reconciles with her father. And actually my own mother died in this past September after living a very full life, and basically totally with it cognitively until like the day she died. She had some physical decline in the last months, but when I knew I went home because she was going to die, and I kept thinking about Anita Murjani's description of how it felt to die. And I thought, well, she knows everything we're thinking and stuff, and that we're coming. And I'm pretty sure my dad's waiting for her. And I mean, I found that book helpful in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So,
and even just like recounting it now to you, talking in relation to your story, but even just in my life and like these petty dramas that I find myself caught up in, and these people and, judging me or me judging them. And just, it's like, oh my gosh, like none of this matters, like, let's just get back to that. Like, it's just so great to remember where we come from, and, what this life is all about, and what this, human experience, spiritual beings having these human experiences is about. So it's just the best, highest, most noble perspective.
Yeah, you're just filling me with joy listening to you talk about that. And yeah, the stuff that you get cranky about, you're like, oh, it doesn't even matter. What are you even wasting that energy on? And it's just old habits that I'm just like, whoops, stop that train of thought. And yeah.
So I'm curious, I know you were going through a divorce that obviously, similar with Elizabeth, and so many women, just especially like breast cancer, we nurture others, and we kind of abandon ourselves and taking care of others. And I do believe, like Louise Hay believed and kind of really defined for us, that different parts of your body where disease manifests is like there's a reason it manifests in those places, and it has a story to tell. So I'd love for you to share kind of some revelations that you had about why it developed in your throat. I mean, it could be completely environmental and purely physical toxins, or it could be a little bit of emotion. Just, you're very in tune, and I know that you had some self-discovery along the way. So I'd love for you to share anything that you kind of feel intuitively about your cancer and what it was trying to teach you.
Well, as soon as I got diagnosed, a friend of mine who's a holistic healer, practices nutrition, and said, oh, thyroid cancer, that's about unexpressed words and suppressed anger. I thought, oh my gosh, because I had, I'm like, and if you knew me, I mean, I'm a party girl, I'm like super outgoing, but in my most intimate relationship, my marriage, I very much self-silenced myself. I was trying to be the good wife. And this isn't just me. It's like a societal pattern. I've since read multiple articles about this. There's one that was in Time magazine in September about how women are self-silencing makes women sick. And it's why 80% of autoimmune diseases are women. And it's just something that it gets ingrained in us that we don't even realize we're doing. And as my marriage is falling apart, and I realized I was like not standing up for myself. I just couldn't make myself do it. It was so hard because I'd grown up in a house where, like my parents never fought, or at least they never fought in front of us. I had no model of how a woman stands up to her husband, even if he's doing things that make her really unhappy and miserable. And so I think that was part, like, I just think that self-silencing in my most intimate relationship. And I read some research recently that this is happening. I'm a baby boomer. So of course I'm sort of catching the tail end of traditional marriage, but it's even happening with younger women today who are self-silencing, particularly to just in a misguided effort to keep a relationship going. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, if you want a healthy relationship, you're going to have to be honest. This like pretending stuff is not happening. It's bad for you. It's bad for the marriage or whatever. So yeah, there was a definite reason why I got thyroid cancer.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but yeah,
No, there's like, the universe, I think, does have a sense of humor some of the time. And so,
yeah, and it's, you say it's difficult for you. You're like so outgoing and obviously you're tough and gritty. 17 miles is hard to do on its own, but over 13,000 feet of mountain peaks and
yeah,
altitude, like I don't know if people understand how difficult it is just to breathe in Aspen at
yeah,
8,000 feet, or Park City, I don't know the elevation, but so, as you're saying that, it reminds me of all the work that I've done recently, and and to know that like we're community beings. We're meant to be in a village
hmm,
to survive the elements, the rival tribes, that whatever the dangers, the saber-toothed tigers, whatever the dangers were in our ancestor days. It's like we are tribal beings that need to be in community. And so to do something that we weren't modeled, to stand up, to
yeah,
express our anger, to do something that feels so scary, it literally feels like we're making a life or death decision. It
yeah,
feels like a death if you express anger to your husband, or I do something that wasn't modeled to me, and or you're taught to be the good girl, or people pleaser, and you're so scared to poke the bear, your husband, my father,
yes,
whatever it is. It feels like you might die if you don't do it. So that's it's irrational as an adult, but like this programming is so ingrained in us that our inner child literally feels like it might die should we change our behavior, and actually honor ourselves. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, as you're saying that, it's like, it seems crazy that we don't do those things, but it's like, it feels like it's terrifying,
you
irrational.
just said that so beautifully, and I want to thank you for that hugely. You just articulated that in a wonderful way. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm learning too. Whew. So what do you counsel? Do people come to you now that you're the survival case, like, or the survivor in shining armor? Like, because I feel like you're such an inspiring motivator. I guess I just want to know, like, how would you advise people to navigate the fear? Because, I stand up on the soapbox and I preach like all the things that the people have done to heal, but like I know that if I was in it and I was getting that terrifying of a diagnosis, like God knows what I would do. I'd probably shut down in fear and forget everything that I ever learned. So how would you like share with someone how to navigate that terror and really like have the space and the courage and the confidence to advocate for yourself and really like feel into what your truth is?
I think you have to go deep. You have to go way, way deep into yourself. Because frankly, I don't know what made me respond so immediately in the way that I did, except that I had come so far, like finally getting out of this marriage, battling this divorce where I really had to fight hard and sometimes like tell my lawyer, no, that is not right. I'm not saying yes to that. And so part of it was I had just come through one crucible, one like fire, and I was like, this is not the end, man. But it also that had taught me that I was really tough. I had just gone to battle with some pretty powerful forces, and I did fine. And so I think that was part of it. But I think the thing is, we have no idea of what we're capable of. And I think you just have to go deep and you have to say, I am going to survive. And if anybody gets all weepy, like, it's like, well, are you giving away your clothes or whatever, as people say, just like push them out of your life. Just be like, no, I am surviving. And like, I did get a couple of like, oh, Kate, I'm so sorry emails. And I'm like, no, I am turning this into the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, I did have an advantage in that I felt fine. I didn't feel sick, right. And that's why I would get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, this does not look like a body that has stage 4 cancer. So throughout, I felt fine, except for during the radiation, where I definitely had some pretty impressive side effects, but they did not start. I was determined. They said the longer you can hold them off, the better. I was determined. So, but anyway, go deep, look for miracles, push away anyone who's pessimistic. I think you have to kind of educate your supporter team to be positive. But I think there's so many resources out there, like any Louise Hay book. I mean, there's another book called Cured by Dr. Jeffrey Rediger, who I think
I interviewed him. Yeah, I love that.
I was pretty sure heard you. The reason I met him was through your podcast. He's like, you can't get any more medical establishment than someone who's on he's on the Harvard Medical School faculty, and the way he just like totally blows up that false statistic that there's a spontaneous remission only 1 in every 100,000. That's baloney. Yeah. And so, I mean, I have in my book and on my website, I just have this little reading list. This is what you have to read. And another resource is my very good friend, Crystal Carruthers, she was the one who turned me on to Joe Dispenza in the first place. And she has a website that's just, it's called cancerfreeforlife.com. And she's got a reading list and that sort of thing. So, I mean, you just got to look for positive stories. Buy any, I don't know how many books I've bought from people who you interviewed on your podcast. I would just do the Kelly Gore reading list, and just do that and listen to those books. One thing I do, and Crystal told me to do this, is I frequently watch and rewatch I think it's the Tales of Transformation or Stories of Transformation that Joe Dispenza has. Oh, yeah. And because that sort of gets into your brain, the fact that cures happen, cures are possible. And I do think we just don't realize the power of this old cancer trauma that still is everywhere in our society, in which the media actually has not been helpful in dispelling. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, but this Cancer Horizons podcast did just take a look at stuff, and the fault lies in our stars. It's just like Ryan's song, but it's it just but.
And I think, I love Joe Dispenza's work and the advanced meditation retreats that he's literally sitting in a room, changing your field and tapping into this collective field, and the energy and the frequency just raise, and you connect to source. I mean, that's like, if anybody can do that, that's a big plus. I'm curious, what complementary treatments did you do and find most helpful? I know you mentioned Reiki. What were some of the things that you did, like dietarily, and then with healing, holistic healing?
Well, I tried to eliminate sugar right away, which I kind of throttled back on that a little bit. but I mean, definitely I meditate more than an hour every day, and it was really hard. When I first went to Joe Dispenza's website, I was like, a 45-minute meditation? Who has time for this? And I'm like, somebody wants to get cured of stage 4 cancer has time for this. And so I do that. I also I have a Reiki heal. I've tried a couple of different Reiki healers, and I go to one once or twice a month. I found an acupuncturist right away who does a lot of clearing out of stuff. I do a lot of yoga. I just think yoga is great. I discovered yoga during my divorce. I got certified as a yoga sculpt instructor, not as a full-fledged yoga instructor, but yoga sculpt with core power yoga. And I still do yoga 2 or 3 times a week, I think. I just think that's very balancing. I do believe in exercising outside. I mean, I do love exercise classes. I think I heard a couple of oncologists talk about how group exercise, they were talking about, I think it was men with prostate cancer who were in, I don't know, soccer team or something. And their recovery was better than men who are just doing exercise. So group exercise classes are great. But I also think it's so key to be in the outdoors. I mean, I try to go barefoot when it's nice because I can just pull up all that really good earth energy. I love trees. I mean, I don't quite always go up and hug them, but just like when I'm running, I'm like, I love you. And I just really try very hard to be part of the universe that I'm in. I don't feel like when you were talking about all the energy fields, I don't think that there's a boundary between our body and the universe that surrounds us. I think we're all part of one big organism. And so like I forget which meditation I listen to, but there's one where you're trying not to be a being. I'm just another particle in the universe. And I just think that gets more flow going between us and our bodies and the world around us. And it's healthy for our bodies. So
yeah, less separation, more oneness. And did you ever play with language? I know a lot of people, when they are dealing with cancer, they don't want to say the word cancer. They call it their, temporary house guest. Or did you do anything with language?
well, one thing I did was like one of my daughters once said, well, when you got sick, I'm like, I never got sick. I said, I got a diagnosis. So what I do is, for a while, I wouldn't even say anaplastic thyroid cancer because I thought that gave it power. But then I thought, no, name it. But so I always talk about the diagnosis. I don't even make it my diagnosis so that it's a temporary thing. And I always, and this is because I do a lot of talking with the universe, I'm always using positive, active tense stuff like, I am cured, I am healthy, I am disease-free. Some people say, there's a phrase that some people use, no evidence of disease. And I'm like, I say disease-free. So that's sort of very positive, active tense self-talk. I am also I'm a writer, but I journal, I keep a gratitude journal that I handwrite. My everyday journal I do type into because I just type fast.
Mhm.
And so I think words can be very healing, and they can also hurt, but they can be very healing. And I try to use them in a healing way.
Yes. Bernie Siegel, who I filmed
Yes.
for Heal, but I couldn't keep him in the film for just a number of reasons, but he's a brilliant man and I like love him to
Mm-hmm.
death. But he said words can become, if you write it out, words, depending on where you start, it becomes very quickly swords.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yes, because I read a couple, like a dear friend of mine who had breast cancer several years earlier. I was like, have you heard of Bernie Siegel? And she's like, oh, it's a well-thumbed book in my house.
Yeah.
And so,
He's,
yeah,
he's one of the OGs and
yes,
love him to death. To life.
yes,
Love him to life with our language.
yes. I know.
Um, what, I guess, like, what has, now that you're, 3 years thriving, what's your mission now? What is it? What is kind of next for Kate?
Well, I want to keep writing more stuff about all these lessons I've learned about our mindset and how so many false beliefs have been ingrained in me. So that's a big thing, is just to fight that in society by writing essays or speaking, because I am getting emails from people, and I'm like so happy to just talk to people about being positive. So now if a friend hits a bump with something, they call me and I'm like, here, this is what I think. This is great that you're doing this. I'm sending them resources and stuff. And the other thing is, the universe has now hit me with this twice. Like, I was listening to something called a podcast where two oncologists were interviewing a third oncologist, which this sounds like a setup for a joke, but it's not. But they
Three oncologists walked into a bar.
very
Yeah.
good. I'm going to work on that. But and they asked the oncologist they're interviewing, what is the top number one thing to prevent cancer? And she goes, clean up the environment. And I'm like, Oh, that's a good one. And then I just got an invitation. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters in Utah, and their speaker at their annual lunch next week it's doctors for cleaning up the climate. I'm like, okay, you've told me twice now. I hear it. So, I mean, I always very much was an environmentalist, but I'm like, this is something I really have to put energy into now.
Yeah.
So those are my two new causes. That one, just educating people about the power of mindset and loving yourself and realizing if someone treats you badly, just put up a fence.
Yeah.
You don't have to, that is not, you don't deserve that. You deserve to be loved and respected. And then the other thing is, I don't want anybody else to have to call up their kid and say, I have stage 4 cancer and 6 months to live. Even worse, I don't want a parent to have that happen with a kid. And so I just think fighting for a cleaner environment, doing everything I can along those lines is key.
Amen. I totally agree. Yes, we are living in a toxic soup and there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, we've got a long to-do list. That's for sure.
A long to-do list, but so many obvious things. And we need
Yes.
activists to go and just,
And I found a few like in the past week. So,
yeah. So, okay, good. New mission. Can't wait for that expose article, whatever periodical or newspaper that you want to blow up that, just like, let's clean up the environment I love it.
Yeah.
So where can people find your book, Cured: Beating Stage 4 Cancer and the Culture That Caused It?
Well, you can find it's on Amazon. You can find it wherever books are sold. Ask for it at your local library. I'm a big fan of libraries. You can also just go to curedthebook.com, which will send you to, the different websites where you can buy it. Or my website, which is kate-rice.com. But basically just look for Cured: Beating Stage 4 Cancer and the Culture That Caused It on Amazon or Apple Books or wherever your favorite place is to buy books.
Awesome. And what is just one last takeaway? What's the last thing you want to share? It could be something related to cancer. It could be something, beaming with pride about your kids, whatever it is. What would you like to share with our audience?
I do love my kids. Oh, they are so wonderful. And they give me so much joy in just the many different ways that they try and succeed. Sometimes they fail and sometimes they succeed. But basically my big takeaway is just be happy, embrace joy, look for it, do what you can to just bring more joy into your life. Because as you bring joy into your life, you bring joy into other people's lives as well. So joy and love.
I love it. So beautiful. And you said something a little bit earlier about, if people are mistreating you, put up a fence. And this is something that I have to remind myself of. So you're a reminder for me. It's like, it really is however people treat you, however people judge you, whatever people say about you, whatever stories in their head, it says more about them than it does about you. And so it's just I'm just trying to figure out the resilience and we just have to know ourselves so well and deeply that nobody else's BS, opinion, pessimism, whatever it is can shake us from that truth of who we are.
You said that once again, beautifully articulated, and thank you.
Awesome. Well, so nice meeting you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your incredible story. And go out and get the book, Cured: Beating Stage 4 Cancer and the Culture That Caused It. And please share it with anybody in your life in that battle themselves. Thanks again.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much. And thank you for your podcast. I just am addicted to it. So in a very good way.
Amazing.
So, thanks so much for sharing some time with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Heal Podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And please rate and review us so that we can grow and reach more people. Thanks so much, and be well.